Hello, hello. Welcome back.
Hello,
I'm Nick,
I'm Matt.
and this is Nick and Matt's Everyday English Corner, episode 8.
Welcome.
Welcome, welcome. And today we're going to be talking about travel.
Absolutely. Something that I know I've done a lot of, and I think Nick has done as well.
I might have done more travel in the 20 something years that I've been alive than more people get to do in their lifetimes. So, yeah, there's
It's
definitely
true.
a there's a whole lot to unpack here with this topic.
Absolutely. Especially my social circle. A lot of people where I live have barely left the state, let alone the country.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah,
happy that I've gotten the chance to visit a lot of places.
yeah. Travel is something I feel like you have to do at least once in your life because just being able to experience other cultures and just see what's out there in the world outside of your little bubble that is your town, even if it's just traveling to another city, every experience is valuable, whether it's a few hundred kilometers or miles or going outside of the country to somewhere else. Just going to other places is something I'm personally very passionate about.
Absolutely. It's both a valuable experience because you get to experience different cultures, you get different experiences in food and sights, and a lot of those stay with you for the rest of your life. So I believe everyone should do it if they get the chance.
Undeniably. But that does raise an interesting point because, Matt, you're from the countryside, especially the southern American countryside, which I know definitely has an image of, well, for lack of a better word, farmers who don't really leave their towns, sometimes let alone their own house or their own farm. So, how was that like for you when you got to leave your little rural town and step foot into the bigger world, I guess you could say? What were your like initial impressions when you first got the chance to do that?
Well, I've done a lot of traveling across the United States first. I've actually been in every state except for Hawaii and Alaska because they're more difficult to get to. Um, So as a result, I've seen kind of how the culture around the United States changes a lot. Um, Today, I don't think this is a noticeable difference, but for example, and this is just a small thing that you notice, but it's kind of changes your perspective. In Southern America, when you get tea at any restaurant, it comes sweet. So if you don't want sweet tea, you have to specifically ask for unsweet tea. And then in the opposite side, in Northern America, all tea comes unsweet by default, as my experience when I was younger. So whenever I went to a restaurant in Northern America, I asked for tea, and they gave me just unsweet tea, and they thought I was very weird for wanting sugar as well. It was an interesting cultural shock just within the state of my own country. And then naturally, as you leave the country, these little differences become much bigger.
Yeah, it's that is such a good point because America alone is huge. It's bigger than the continent of Europe. So continental Europe fits inside of America, which for some people is very difficult to understand. But when American culture is brought up, one of the things you really have to ask is, oh, well, which part of America? Because it changes that drastically. And that's just inside of the country as is. So I'm from California, but when I went to Texas for the first time, I experienced culture shock inside my own country because in Texas, Well, in America, there's an image that everything is very big, but in Texas, it's even bigger. So it's things like that that will get you just inside of your own country.
Absolutely. The culture is different for each state, and then definitely some more so than others. Um, for example, I know Texas has a very different culture than the rest of the United States. And there's also, let's see, the Southern Florida, that has a very different culture as well. So there's a few places that just stand out completely, and a few that are close enough where they're very similar too.
Or like you said with Hawaii and Alaska, which you haven't been to, but Hawaii is still part of America. It's a tropical paradise, and it's completely different from, well, California, which is a completely dried up mountainous landscape. Or you go to Alaska, where it's one of the coldest places on the planet, filled with beautiful nature reserves, parks, mountains. So no matter where you go, you're getting this different experience, which I really can't understate the value of that when it comes to travel.
Absolutely. And even more so once you step out of the country. I believe the first time I went to another country, I went to Mexico, which is the neighbor of America. And the cultural shock I got from that was immense. That was both in the culture of the people, the food, all the sights, just how society ran. Everything surprised me. And that was just a neighboring country. So I can only you can only imagine the further away you go, the bigger these differences are as well.
Yeah, especially when you go to Europe, or in our case, where we're living in Japan right now, one of the East Asian countries, which are a complete 180 from anything we have in the States when it comes to culture.
Hmm.
What would you say was one of the biggest culture shocks you've ever had in your life when it comes to travel? It could be our lives here in Japan. It could be the first time you set foot in another country. Like, what's something that's really like stuck with you to this day?
I believe, honestly, the biggest culture shock I've had is in Japan, and it's in the sheer safety of the country. Of course, no country is completely safe, but in Japan, if you leave an item unattended, there's not an expectation it'll get stolen. If you're walking home, there's not really any kind of guard up for a lot of people that they're going to get grabbed or robbed. And the mindset is just very different. Because I know in America, even in Southern America, I would not walk home alone on the street just because of how dangerous it could be. And it makes America sound terrible that way, but just the expectations of safety is a huge culture shock to me.
Yeah, and that changes the way people behave just on a daily basis. But if you never travel, you never get that experience. You never get to see that side of the world, which for people who have never traveled, I feel like is something they're really missing out on, is being able to see the way other societies run and the way people just live their lives with completely different ways of thinking. It's a very, very valuable experience.
Absolutely. And I've had that in Europe as well when I went to Germany. Just how different it is to go out and order food, uh, as well as, especially in Japan as well, where there's no tipping culture. That's something you get used to in America. So once you're not able to do it, it feels amazing, but just not having that expectation to give them extra money, is very new experience to me.
Yeah, it actually leads into something called reverse culture shock, which is where when you travel to another country for a long period of time, which, for example, what we're doing right now, where we're living in Japan, but this is also true for people who do study abroad experiences when they're, for example, in university and they're immersed in a culture that they have never really seen before. They first experience the culture shock of living in that country. But then after living there for, well, 6 months, maybe a year, then they come back to their home country, and all of a sudden, things that they took for granted for 18, 19 years, all of a sudden feel very foreign because they had begun to adopt and understand the other country's way of thinking.
Absolutely. And a good example of that is whenever I'm going back to America, I believe I'm going to automatically take my shoes off when I walk home. Whereas normal in Japan, it's not normal in America, but I think that's going to stay with me the rest of my life.
Ah, yes, the whole indoor shoes culture, or just not wearing shoes in a lot of facilities in general. That's a big one. Although that's quite unique to Japan, I would say. I'm not sure about the other Asian countries, but again, that's just another reason to go and travel and experience them because it's these things that you don't know that
Mm,
you don't find out until you either research the country or just go there for yourself and experience the culture shock firsthand.
absolutely. And that's always the best part of it is the experiences stay with you forever because you go to another country, you get new experiences, you're surprised by how different some things are, and you get great stories to tell people when you get home.
Without a doubt. There are so many stories I remember, especially from my time living in Europe. I was very lucky. I got to move to Europe for five
Oh,
years. So I lived in Finland. And in my time there, I got to travel to other countries all across Europe. So some of the memories that really stick with me, for example, are when I went with my family all the way across Scandinavia. So we took a boat from Finland to Sweden, and then
mm.
we loaded our car onto this boat. So we drove off across Sweden into Norway, and then we
Oh,
stayed on a farm in Norway that my dad rented out, and we lived like a Norwegian farming life for like a week, and then drove all the way back through the beautiful Norwegian mountains. Looks like something straight out of a fairy tale, by the way. Back through Sweden, and then back to our home in Finland, back on the boat again. And that is something I will
oh yeah.
never forget.
Norway and Finland are famous for beautiful scenery. I believe a lot of it's used in a lot of movies. So a lot of people see movies and see that scenery without even realizing it, I think.
Yeah, and again, it's not just people that you meet, it's these sights, these views, these vistas that you see in movies online and on social media, but
Hmm.
actually going and experiencing these beautiful sights, it doesn't even require you to leave your own country. Every country has this beautiful stuff, and this is why an active uh, I'm such an activist for people just getting out of the house and going to places maybe an hour or two away from their house, because if you don't get out and just see what's out there even around you locally, you're missing out on so much beautiful stuff that you just wouldn't know it was there otherwise.
Absolutely. And to kind of like go on slang because you gave me your best memory, I think one of my favorite memories was when I went to Mexico.
Mm.
I am a big history fan, so I wanted to see some Aztec ruins, but they were about an hour away from like the very touristy place that we were at. So I brought a friend along and we basically like waved down a cab driver who, picked us up and we told him where we wanted to go. So he drove us an hour out into the countryside of Mexico, just to see some like Aztec ruins for about an hour. And what surprised me was that when we arrived and we got ready to pay him, he waved away our money and said that he'll wait for us, even though it took an hour to go around this entire Aztec ruins. So I was surprised that he was willing to just wait for us and pay when we were done. That sort of expectation was not something I would ever do in America. So I was really happy that, even over in Mexico, that there's still that believable to trust somebody, not to cheat you, and just that spend that amount of time on a tourist.
Yeah, the connections that you're able to make with people,
Mm.
I truly think is the well, for me, it's the greatest part of traveling, especially when I came to Japan. The amount of connections I've made with people, just even speaking basic phrases. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced in my home country. And like you're describing in that story, the people that you meet, and through those people, the experiences that you're able to have really cannot be understated. Just how special these moments are, and you really won't forget them because they leave such an impact on you, and a lot of times fundamentally change you as a person.
Absolutely. Especially when you go and experience new cultures, you meet interesting people, you see amazing sights. Like the first time I got to see a castle in Germany, it honestly just put a deep impression on me because castles don't exist in America, obviously, since our country is very young. So just getting that realization that the world is definitely much older than normally consider was a really good thing to think about all of a sudden.
Oh yeah, for history buffs as well, the sheer amount of content that is out there, like you mentioned, castles or old war ruins,
Um,
ruins in general
and
from ancient civilizations. There's so much out there for so many different types of people, extrovert, introvert. Travel is not something that is limited to one specific type of person. Any type of person can go out and do travel, whether they're into just seeing nature, whether they want to see architecture of big cities, go and view famous sites, just go out and talk to people from different cultures. That you can do it all.
Absolutely. And that goes to one question I want to ask you. Other than Japan, what is your favorite country that you've gone to visit? Not lived in, but went to visit.
Oh, that's tough. That is very tough. But I would probably have to say, actually, like you were just talking about, Germany. Germany is probably my favorite country that I've been to because
Yeah. Mm.
when I was growing up in Finland, my best friend was from Germany at the time, and I would go and visit him every like summer or every series of breaks. My whole family would take a plane ride to Germany because, again, Europe is very small compared to the US, so it was not a long trip to get there. And we would just hang out in his house, and I would experience German culture firsthand as if I were just on a, a German school kid's summer break. And I was experiencing all of that at the grassroots level, which, again, is something that sticks with me to this day because those were some of the best memories I ever made in my life.
Absolutely. So that certainly comes from your childhood too, visiting Germany.
Yeah.
I think mine's answer is the same. I love my visit to Germany. I got to visit a friend in Germany, and having a friend who lives there, of course, is the best way to enjoy because you get to go to places a lot of tourists don't get to experience. Um, and I think I understood because everyone makes a joke about Germany that Germans love to take walks. And I realized that is true because often after we get back from like drinks or we would go see that, he would ask if I wanted to go take a walk. And in America, a walk might be like, let's take a walk for 20 minutes. Whereas he would take a walk for like 2, 3 hours.
Wow.
And apparently that was considered fairly normal in a lot of German when they mean by take a walk.
Yeah, I have not experienced that, but that's the type of stuff that gets you. Um, so you would say Germany was also your favorite?
Absolutely. It was my favorite.
Huh. Well, that's a very strange coincidence, but obviously, my favorite trip that I've ever taken was to Japan. That fundamentally changed my entire life, and I loved it so much that I wanted to come and live here. But yeah, these experiences that we build up, um, I feel very fortunate. Not just for myself, but I'm also glad for you that you got to have these experiences as well. Especially because a lot of Americans do not leave their home state, which I find insane.
No, it's pretty common to hear the story where people die about 100 miles from where they're born, uh, and they don't leave the country or the state at all.
Yeah, and I've actually asked people why do you not travel? Well, not that directly, but like, have you ever thought about traveling? And they're like, I like it here. What else is there to see out there? But I don't know. I just really can't agree with that line of thinking because I would not be the person I am today if I hadn't gone to all these countries and taken in their way of thinking, experienced the way they lead their life, because it's undoubtedly shaped the person I am today. And I'm sure you probably feel the same way as well.
Absolutely. I would not be the same person I am today if I didn't go around the world and experience everything that was actually different from where I lived.
Yeah, it's it's just fundamental human understanding of our fellow persons, and it really can't be stated how important that is.
Absolutely. And it's the same as we grow up, because as younger children, our entire world might be the house. And as we grow up, it might be the neighborhood. And as we still get older, it might be the town. So as we grow as people, our world gets bigger. So expanding that to the entire world as you see and experience it just helps you grow as a person.
Yeah, and I know you and I are still planning to do a lot more traveling throughout Japan as we live here, and in the future we can definitely make some episodes about our experiences going around the country. and so forth. Because even though Japan isn't nearly as big as countries like America, there's still so much within just one country that it could definitely leave a very big impression going forward. So I'm looking forward to talking about that as well in a future episode.
Absolutely. And that'll be good for our future as we explore Japan more. We have some things we can talk about our experiences in Japan directly, as opposed to other countries.
For sure. But I think that'll do it for today. Really glad we got to talk about this. Travel is such an amazing thing. But for now, let's go ahead and call it here. So
All right.
that was Nick and Matt's Everyday English Corner, Episode 8, Travel. And thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.
Thank you. See you later.
See you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.